So we're rolling there.
Cool.
All right, and I'm rolling here, so I'm gonna do.
Am I sitting close enough?
Clapper. I don't know. As close as you can get the mic, the better. Yeah. Else it's got like a little bit of an echo. All right. So what did we talk about? We talked about you came in and you got your traffic, and you were stressed out because you know how unforgiving I am about tardiness, but
Yes.
you're the guest of honor, so it doesn't matter. So we're like opposites in a way because you manage a big, giant. What I say to the patrons, the young kids who are like they want to go into some sort of creative business in their exploratory phase.
Yeah.
I'm like I am more. My job is more closely related to a skateboarder than it is to a director of a big project or a writer on a big project. I'm like skateboarding and you are like Formula One.
I disagree.
Okay. Talk it to me.
And especially in 2024, I disagree. I mean, what you're trying to do is put out great stuff, and you're trying to surmount the obstacles to do that. So it's the exact same thing. But you have all sorts of obstacles that I don't have, but I have all sorts of obstacles that you don't have. And the fact that we're just doing this, you wrote me an email, and we're here now. The stuff I make doesn't go like that. You got emails, conference calls, pitches, proposals, budgets, scripts, revised scripts. Maybe you get that script through exactly as you hoped it to be. But then, like God comes in, and it's the location you can't get. It's the actor who totally wants to do it, but can't do it. It's rain, especially in Georgia. It's rain.
Oh, that's where you shoot.
That's where we shot The Walking Dead. And we
Okay.
shot the last season of Fear the Walking Dead there. But it's tax credits running out. It's all this stuff that, frankly, you don't want to think about, but you have to. And in fact, when I was a kid,
Sounds a lot like Formula One to me.
I don't know. I mean, or you can think of Formula One like speed, and you just go, and that's what you're able to do.
But no, it takes 10 people to start one of those cars.
Okay, well, there you go.
And
there
computers and blah, 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 blah.
But I kind of dig being able to just go.
Me too.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering I think when kids, so it's like a lot of the patrons who ask for advice, they're, either maybe they're in high school, maybe they're 17, they've made YouTube videos, and they're thinking, I would like to jump from YouTube videos to being in the world of like production on TV. And my position is like, it's not your world. If you want to be the creator on just tell me if I'm wrong. If you want to be the creator on The Walking Dead, you're managing people. You're not figuring out how to make a little rig for the camera so that you can hold it on your bicycle. You're not doing that. Some guy's doing that.
You're right.
Or you're so I think one of the things that I'm interested in is like, what do you tell these kids? How do you, what's the path? What was like your path to do your job?
What's kind of fascinating about it is, I don't know if it's fascinating anybody but me, but I've later in life learned that I have ADHD, and it's sort of like explained a lot. And the things that I could focus on and the things that sort of just consume me were comics and video games and movies. And, looking back on it now, it's like that's the stuff that, I don't know, made me feel normal. And so I'm so into those things that I'm starting to do them myself. On an Apple IIe computer. Oh, God. And so when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, I came up with a plan, which is, and it was so pragmatic for that kid. He wanted to, well, this was his plan. I won't get to the end before the beginning. His plan was to, okay, if he could just get an internship at DC Comics. For some reason, it was DC over Marvel. And then, maybe he could get an assistant editor job. And then if he worked real hard, he could get an editor job, and in between there start writing comics. And then if he really works hard and writes comics, maybe he could just be a comic book writer. And then he's working from home, or even a van. That was in my head before van life. And I could write comics at home, which was my dream. And then maybe I could write TV and film and sort of get there. And I followed that plan pretty much to the letter my whole life. I got an internship at Marvel Comics. The one sort of, I don't know, strategic error that I feel lucky for was I got my internship at Marvel my sophomore year of college. And it felt like they were going to offer me a job. But it was my junior year, and I wasn't going to drop out of college. And so my sort of window of opportunity, because right after that, the comic book market crashed. A lot of people got laid off at Marvel.
What year is this?
We're talking like 92, 93.
Okay.
And so that the Marvel window closed, I started, but I still was following that path. One of the only comic book companies in LA was Matt Groening's Bongo Comics. They did Simpsons comics, Itchy and Scratchy, Radioactive Man. I got a job there while I was an assistant at a production company. It was Dawn Steele, the first female head of a studio, Columbia Pictures. She was a legend and a legendary, I put it in quotes because this was her reputation. She was a much more complex person than this, but a legendary, horrible boss. Mm-hmm. I had a good relationship with her because I never worked for her directly. Not that it was a close relationship, but it was a lot like, Homer Simpson to Mr. Burns. Like, who is that? I got a job at Bongo Comics as essentially an assistant editor. And then I started writing comics for them. So the plan was working, but I started writing. I kept on writing. I went to film school out here at USC.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask that.
And it was a writing concentration at USC. It was screenwriting. And I was writing crazy screenplays while I was working at Bongo. And one of them I had written for Chris Elliott. Which,
I love him. Always have.
Which was like, even at the time, not necessarily like, oh yeah, that's the commercial angle. And it didn't go anywhere. But a friend of mine who went to SC, who was an executive at Disney, handed it to somebody who had a cartoon at Disney. And they read the whole thing. It was 127 pages. It was crazy. And I got my first sort of like freelance job writing for this cartoon that never even happened. But then a couple other cartoons happened. I kept on working at Bongo. I got one of the greatest sort of side jobs ever, which was punch-ups, which is you go in and you pitch jokes on a script that's already been written. And it was for a show called Pepper Ann, which was created by this brilliant artist, Sue Rose. And it was run by Nahnatchka Khan, who was the executive who passed on that script. And Nahnatchka has gone on to have a huge career. She was the showrunner of Fresh Off the Boat. I think she wrote and directed Always Be My Maybe. And this whole group that I was in at SC, they were a year younger than me. really took off. But anyways, I was doing these punch-ups. I was pitching jokes. I loved it because it was the most honest thing in the world. If you've written a script, it's not like you're like super psyched for somebody to come in and pitch jokes on your script.
Mm-mm.
So if they laugh, that's just totally honest. And I love it. There's no thinking involved. And sometimes you would pitch them and it would just be like, and there's all the writers in the room, just dead silence. And I loved that because that was honest.
Mm.
But if I pitched a joke and they burst out laughing, it just was the greatest. And I think was known for working way too hard and having 15 jokes off of one joke to pitch. And eventually I got hired on that show, Pepper Ann, as a writer, because Dave Hemmingson, he recently wrote The Holdovers, had moved on to live action and his slot opened up. I got in there. And while I was working on Pepper Ann, and I had left Bongo, at the goodbye sort of lunch, Matt, who, I didn't know very well, said, now you got to create your own cartoon. And I was going to start working on that anyways, but I did. And I pitched that cartoon to Disney while I was working on Pepper Ann. And the executive in question just said no. And it was a crazy cartoon. It was sort of, it was like a 70s cop show set in a middle school, like a Quinn Martin show. Instead of cops, there were safety patrollers. I don't know if you had the safety patrol with the orange sashes.
I know what they are, but...
And they were busting cheat sheet cartels and counterfeit baseball card manufacturers, and it was really straight-faced. And they just said no. And I was in my office talking to a director, and he was bemoaning that they had said no to him. And I kind of went off on Disney TV Animation at the time. And the head of Disney TV Animation heard the whole thing, walked into my office, very smart and funny guy named Barry Blumberg. He was like, what are you talking? But he also had a temper too. Not a huge one, but he wasn't going to be polite about it. He was like, what are you talking about it? And I had my whole Bible. I had artwork that I had commissioned from a great artist, a great Simpsons artist that I knew from my work at Bongo, this guy named Chris Roman. It's a beautiful Bible. And I just slapped it down on the table. I go, you guys just said no. I did this whole thing. I had the pilot script written. They optioned it the next day. And a year later, I was making that cartoon. And that, was the first show I show ran. When it started, TV animation, right when we got started, TV animation was dissolved. It was absorbed into Disney Channel. And it was weird. We were kind of like orphaned, but that was amazing because we had a 2-season order and I got to do it exactly the way I wanted to. And it was a crazy show. It was called Fillmore. And it was, I think, the last Saturday morning cartoon on ABC. And it was such an amazing experience that after that, I wanted to move into live action. And throughout that, I was still trying to do comics, and I did some here and there. I created a series at Bongo. I did some stuff for Marvel, which was thrilling. But it was like 5 years in the wilderness. Those credits don't transfer. You could create a show, a cartoon that is, a Saturday morning cartoon, a daytime cartoon, and they aren't like, oh, you created that and you ran it? Well, come right into live action. Those credits don't transfer. It's like some community college credits don't transfer. And so it was 5 years of working really hard, of, writing script after script. I wrote mostly original hours. And, eventually I was able to get an agent, the agent I'm still with today. And he was younger when he started, and we both kind of grown up. And You know, it was a different time when I started, but I was on a show called Drive. That was my first show. And I'll never forget it because I started wearing these when I started working at home. Because when I ran Fillmore, I was in like a t-shirt and shorts. I think there were socks and sandals at the same time. And yet
It's like comic book guy in The Simpsons.
oh yeah. And yet you're dealing with a lot of money. You're dealing with managing people. And at home, I wanted to have some ritual to be like, I got to go hardcore here. I got to like really, because I really didn't want to chase trends. I wanted to do my own thing. And by doing that, you had to have a lot of output in my mind. So I was going to these meetings. You go on these general meetings for them to meet you as a writer. And I would wear this, and my agent would get calls like, what is he doing? Who is this guy? Like, what is that? And my agent was like, you got to stop wearing ties. And I'm like, I can't. I got to keep it real. I got to, be me. But one night I was at my house, and I had to go to my girlfriend's house. I wound up sleeping over there. I didn't have a tie. It was like late at night. I had to go over there. I didn't have a tie. And I remembered I had a meeting the next morning. And I went to that meeting. It's the first meeting I did without a tie, and I got hired. That was my first.
Yes, your agent was right. Yeah.
He was, he was right. But it was a very short-lived series. I thought it was a super cool series. It was called Drive. It starred Nathan Fillion. It was about an illegal cross-country race. And I co-wrote the season finale, which I believe was the 6th episode, which premiered on MySpace. So a different time.
How did that even work? What year?
Oh, this is where I'm really bad. 2007, maybe?
Okay, so streaming over the internet is like 3 or 4 years old.
Oh, yeah. And
at this point.
I think it wasn't on Fox. It was a Fox show. I don't think it made it to broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was only on MySpace. And yeah, there was a lot of buffering.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was crazy. Telling my parents how to navigate that, like MySpace rather than turning on a TV. The next year, I don't think I got staffed. I had a lot of bad meetings. But after that, I wound up on this show called Life with Damian Lewis, run by a guy named Rand Ravitch. He's an amazing writer. And that show lasted a year rather than 6 episodes. And neither one of those shows really had writers on set. And that's become a thing now where writers really aren't on set. But in, I don't know, classic television and recent television, writers are writer producers. Okay. They're on set, and they shouldn't be tapping the director on the shoulder every 5 minutes, but they should be there to help guide things. They should not be walking directly up to an actor directing them. That's bad because the director is the person in charge on set. But quietly and not publicly, kind of going up to the director and talking about things maybe, or if they see something wrong, or if they see an opportunity for something. I mean, shooting something is a living thing. It's not just following the script to a T, which I do believe in, but maybe there's opportunities to be had. The location you're in, the situation you're in, or problems to solve. I mean, I've written a lot on set because of problems to solve, but I wasn't on set much for that, a little bit more than on Drive. And then that went pretty well, except for the show not continuing. Am I doing the whole resume? Is this too much? There's only a
No,
couple more shows.
I'm just trying to understand the path of like how you end up. But it sounded like you were very focused in the very beginning from a really young age, and you had this target, and you had an imagined path that worked for a little while, and then things start changing, technology start changing, and then you reach this decision of the thing that like grabbed me was all of a sudden it's live action. It's like you've graduated and the whole thing began with comics. And like, why that turn? Why that fork?
Well, Fillmore was just, I look at that show and it was just executed in a way that I absolutely wanted. It was, every aspect of it was how I wanted it to be. And that's crazy. But it just certain things happened, like there wasn't that much oversight of it. Especially I was keeping within budget. So it wasn't really a priority for Disney Channel. So I got to do it as I wanted to. And I aspire to do things. This is a live action show like The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which I think is one of the most brilliant kids shows ever. There's a real vision and a voice and a tone that was consistent. I got to do that. And I was like, I don't know if it'll ever get better than this. And I do aspire to live action. So I'm going to do that. I hope to work in animation again, but I wanted to move into that. And I didn't picture it happening overnight, and it didn't. It did not happen overnight. It took 5 years. And it was giving up being an executive producer and having cachet and cred to having none. But I wanted to do something different. I wanted to try to execute the same way I executed that cartoon. The next show I got on, though, after Life, called Flash Forward, it was on ABC. That show, that I can't say enough good things about it because I was on set and there was just an amazing staff there. And it was created by David Goyer and Brandon Braga. And it was this big, it was genre, which was why I got into it in the first place. And it was this sprawling story. I mean, the long and short of it is the whole world passes out, sees the future. Like that's, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know the exact amount of like 4 months, the amount of a TV season, 4 months ahead. So we have all these pieces of the finale that they see that are not contextualized in the pilot. And you have to tell a story that makes those pieces make sense and be amazing and be surprising. And it was this creative puzzle that was based on a book by this guy named Robert Sawyer. And I loved it. And it was a huge cast. And I was on set every day of the scripts I wrote. And I learned so much so quick. And David, who has become a real friend, I think I was something like an executive story editor, which is just a really junior position. He didn't know what position I was and thought I was much more senior and was giving me lots of responsibility. So I was learning really quickly. And I think the reason he thought I did was because of all the experience I had in animation and how it really isn't that different than live action. And it was on that show that I really, really got inspired and really wanted to make things like that. And at the time there were, it was a really cool time in broadcast television. The show Lost was on, and that meant a lot to me. 24 was on, which was incredibly inventive. I think we were starting The Sopranos around then.
Oh, it's okay. So this is the TV revolution where it's starting to become kind of like cinema, like long form cinema. Yeah. And I'm not even just saying like the auteur stuff, because the broadcast stuff was blowing me away. Really was. I love broadcast television. And after that, I was very lucky where I had some choices of shows, and I chose this one show that I wanted to learn
even more. And we didn't go on set, and it was like a procedural, and lots of lovely people on there, but I didn't last long there. And then my agent said, hey, there's this opportunity on Walking Dead for its second season. They had only done 6 episodes. And I had said, oh, no, I really don't want to do that. And he's like, you love that. And I'm like, because I really did love the first season. And I was like, that's it. I love it. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. I'd rather just love it and be a fan. And, he called me maybe some names, and I went to a meeting, and I liked what the executives had to say. And then I had a meeting with Frank Darabont, and Galen Hurd, Robert Kirkman, David A. Alpert. I think, one of the producers has become, like family to me. Denise Huth was there. And it was a meeting that I went in wearing one of these. I had a sweater vest on. And
I love this. This is like, I love this.
They're looking at me like,
yeah.
What the hell is going on? And Frank is at the window. He's smoking a Nat Sherman. And he brought up a show he loved, and he said it's like one of the best shows on television, and like a goofball. I'm not even thinking of it. And I do this thing with my voice involuntarily. I'm like, not so much. He looks at me over his glasses. Everybody in the room looks at me. It is dead silence. And it is not like the dead silence I loved when I was pitching jokes. This was like, uh-oh. And I stood up and I said, thank you very much. I'll take my leave. And and Frank was like, sit down. I don't want to just have people who agree with me. Mm. And I was like, uh-oh, I really, really want this job. And, that was almost 15 years ago. And I was a writer-producer, and by the way, on set in Georgia, like the most real deal, like in it. And the way The Walking Dead was, we were like an independent movie. It was the same sort of, I don't know, kind of agreement that Fillmore was, where if we stayed in budget, there was a lot of freedom. There wasn't without, and this was, before I was running it, there wasn't without a lot of, back and forth between executives and creatives, but there was a lot of freedom, and it was shot on film. And we're not in Atlanta. We're an hour south of Atlanta. We're in a small town called Sonoy. And it was just the best summer camp on earth. It was amazing. And I was doing stories, back in the basement when I was reading those comics, playing those games, watching those movies. Like, this is what I wanted to do. And I gave everything to it, and I think my work was appreciated. And I began running the show in season 4. And, it was incredible. I mean, the work, Robert Kirkman's work, Robert Kirkman created the comic, and the show, I believed in really adhering to the comic, but I also wanted to surprise the readers of the comic and not do it exactly the same way. I also wanted to take inspiration from it and do new things, but I wanted those big moments from the comics to come to life pretty much as they did, or not as they did, but to bring about the feeling that they gave. Yeah. And season 4, I remember middle of the season, and it was a big thing. It was like, oh shit, can I do this? Like I was saying, oh yeah, I can do this. And I was like, can we do this? And I was lucky. I mean, there was a machine that was up and running, but middle of the season, after we shot our mid-season finale, which was, epic and parts of buildings destroyed and everybody's last day of that shoot, everybody's going off to this roadhouse down the street, celebrate. And I just hung back and just walked the set, which is still smoking. And that feeling of having brought those 8 episodes to life, those first 8 episodes of show running, it was unbelievable. And I'll say this, if you're into zombies or robots or aliens, odds are you're not like the most like socially adept person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet, if you have a talent for this stuff, you could wind up in charge of hundreds of people and managing them and helping them and directing them, and I don't mean as a director, I mean just as manager. And it's a wild thing because you're like, oh, I was reading this stuff to get away from people.
Okay.
And now I have a responsibility to all these people. And I will tell you, that responsibility to that crew to do good work was the thing that absolutely motivated me every day. I wanted to do stuff for the audience, but to see people who work in the Georgia heat, who cheer you on, who have an incredible stake in the work, whether they're laying down track or holding the boom or building a set, that motivates you. And this was 16 episodes a year. This was, real deal television in my mind. From May to like early November. And
summer.
And this is also not streaming rules. This has much more in common with like how the $6 million Man was shot. We have 7-8 day shoots. Maybe for a big episode, we'll get 9 or 10, but generally it's 7 or 8 day shoots. And you're prepping one while you're shooting the other, and it's go, 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 go. It was it was a really difficult time. But yeah, I loved it.
How old are you when that's happening? When it's at its most stressful?
Let me do the math. You notice I'm not good with years.
No, you're not good. It's funny. Yeah. I would think because you sculpt in time, I would think that.
No, and there's this passage in Edward Hallowell's book, Driven to Distraction, which is, he's one of the big ADHD guys. And I've only discovered this later in life. I was always like, oh, I have a terrible memory. But it's like, I could look it up. It's on my phone. But basically, that life is like just these slides that are disconnected. And it's very difficult to place yourself in time. ADHD is a real time sort of impairment. Like you don't quite know how time is, but ADHD isn't like you're distracted all the time. You can get sucked in, and that actually was the best job for somebody with ADHD in my mind is show running.
Because there's all these pieces.
So the distractions are all things you have to do. So I don't know if you're stuck. Oh, don't worry. There's plenty to do on the management side. There's plenty to do with looking over props, looking over sets, communicating your vision on this, that, and the other thing. And I was all over everything, which is how I learned it in animation. But how old was I? Oh, geez. Okay, wait. I just saw somebody sent out like the trailer for the first season I did. She said 2013. So let's do some.
11 years ago.
11 years ago. Okay. I was 42.
Okay. All right. So that's what I'm getting at. I'm like, okay, you got to have some stamina.
I don't. Oh no, it was very little sleep.
Yeah.
And
that stuff can kill you, man. That can
oh
wake you up.
oh,
And
I
are you
don't.
living? What's the job like? I'm trying to understand the physical experience of the job. So, do they rent you a house? Are you like what are you living in?
Well, I am going. I mean, I am going back and forth. I'm there a lot,
Okay.
and I lived in. I lived in a hotel in Peachtree City for a while, which was like just like 15, 20 minutes away, not that far, but it was too far for me. And there was one night where I'm getting back at like 2 o'clock in the morning for my first day. So I have my bags, and there's not a lot of hotels in Peachtree City, which is the bigger town near Sonoy. And it's raining. It's raining hard. There are no parking spaces because Chick-fil-A like takes over the entire hotel, and there's all these like eat more chicken, the cows that paint the graffiti, eat more chicken. All those cars all around. I'm like way, way, way far away. I have my bags. I put my bags down and I shut the door, and it's raining, and my bags are just rolling down the hill. And I was like, yeah, I got to stay in Sonoy. So I rented a house the next year. It was amazing. On the show, there's this essentially gated community, this walled community, that is it's a huge set for the show. It's called Alexandria. It's where a lot of them live. It's sort of this incredible safe zone that they find. And they were just building this, I mean, it wasn't truly gated, but this housing development right when we were doing the show. And Tom Luce, who was the line producer, it was just this unbelievable, brilliant move where we got to put a wall around the entire thing, and we got to take it over. And I got to rent a house in that on set. So I didn't do much directing at all because the job was too consuming. I was approved to, I wanted to, I was going to on 2 episodes, and I pulled out both times because it was just too much work to be done. But one thing I got to direct, which was one like pickup shot. This is the most minor thing in the world, just shooting with a black magic, but it was on my porch. And we went into my kitchen, and we were able to look at the footage, go back out to the porch and do it. It was the house I was renting. It was the most amazing thing. Eventually, I got a house in Sonoy, and it was 6 minutes from the studio, and that's how it all was to me. Just like, how close could I be to the studio?
So there's a studio in
Yeah.
and they built a whole studio.
It was
for this. Was it purpose built, or did it exist?
It existed for years.
Okay.
I think like that Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot, was shot there. I think Super Mario Brothers, the Bob Hoskins version, was shot there. There was that Ashton Kutcher and Katherine Heigl movie. I just would see the posters up
Okay.
on the wall. It was there for years. It's been there for years and years and years. And it was Georgia has always, I don't want to say has always been, for many, many, many years, has been a film hub.
Did they shoot Gone with the Wind in Georgia?
I bet you they did.
Yeah.
I bet you they didn't, but maybe because so much of it was interior.
Yeah.
But like Smokey and the Bandit was shot in Georgia. Tom Luce explained to me, because he's been big. He comes from Georgia film, and it's just been a bit of a hub. And then as the tax credits over the past several years, then forget it. I mean, the amount of work that's been there has been amazing. And, Tyler Perry's studio is unbelievable. He bought basically an army base.
Wow.
And we shot there. So he showed me around one day. And it was one of the most incredible things. I mean, it was like, I'm going to say it wrong, like 200 acres, 300 acres. And what he got houses, he got parade grounds, these beautiful old brick houses. We shot this community known as the Kingdom there, and it was all these beautiful brick buildings. There was a theater, a golf course. I think, has built a New York City street there, and then he took me to a fairly more recent building, like from the 80s, this long building. And he took me down to the first floor. And what he had done was build, because he does like sitcoms as well as, hour-longs, set after set after set after set, all in a line down the length of this building so that he could shoot a scene, move the set up, shoot another scene, move the set up. It was incredible. He had upstairs, he had built a White House set. He had built a courtroom set, and he just uses them all for his stuff. I mean, it was like a filmmaker's
That's
dream.
what I'm like,
Yeah.
but on
I'm
on
telling
like
you.
this kind of a scale. But the management of it is so intimidating. At what point how early on were you able to like earn a living and be okay in that sense? Did you ever go through like a phase where you were just like struggling and money was like a real factor, or?
Well, I mean, you keep a very low. I believed in keeping a very low overhead. While things are uncertain. And I'd say it's only in the last several years where I, maybe stopped worrying a little bit.
Okay.
But only a little bit.
All right. So that never
That's
goes
all-
away.
It
doesn't- it's just part of
the family I come from. And I don't know. The whole vibe is just, don't get too comfortable. But yeah, I mean, we kept a very low overhead, and I'm just trying to think, like the time between animation and live action got pretty dire. There were, and by the way, that time I was picking up little jobs,
Right.
because that cartoon was not. I was a very, very young showrunner. I did not have a lot of credits, so they did not back up the Brinks truck in any way. And I even look back at it now and I'm like, holy crap, how did they get away with that? So when I was moving into live action, things got very, very dire. But I just had, animation jobs would occasionally come in. There were some weird video game jobs that came in.
Green lights.
What's that?
Green lights.
What is that?
Keep going.
Yes.
Keep
Oh,
going.
yeah,
And that's because I feel like one of my, because a lot of the people who are, who are like, who are patrons or who like, write me, they're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And so like my brother agrees with me on this too, is like, I try to discourage people and say, look, this life of like living off of your creativity is for a certain kind of people. It's extremely uncertain. And I try to discourage people. I say, look, if it's not like just, you have no choice, I say, don't do it.
But I will say this. I mean, I had a job. I'm saying when I started out, I had a job that was creative adjacent. And I had a very low overhead. When I was working in animation, I was living in initially I was living in a foreclosed condominium with no furniture. And I still loved it. I had an IKEA desk in the walk-in closet that I powered by using the light socket to go in there. I don't know. And my friend and I would go to the Huntington Hospital cafeteria to eat because the food was so cheap there. But I had money before that, I had money coming in as like an assistant of some sort. And then you write at night, and it's a hardcore life. I think the thing that you really spend, and now I feel it a lot, is time. Meaning, up until pretty recently, I was working every day of the week and most nights of the week. And I regret that now. I mean, I'm proud of the work, but I regret that because I'm like, holy.
Did you get sick? Did you have any like health stuff?
You know, I didn't look too good.
Okay.
But not that I'm saying I'm Brad Pitt right now, but I didn't have any debilitating things, but I can see it wasn't healthy, and I think it put a lot of more miles on the vehicle than I should have. I mean, the last couple of years of Walking Dead, the amount of sleep was little because I was deeply, deeply involved. I didn't take my hands off the wheel of any script, any edit, any prop. And I think I did drive people crazy to a degree. I don't think I was in any way mean, but I was super detail oriented, and a lot of people appreciated that, and a lot of people felt that their jobs were more valued that way, in as much as it wasn't just like some afterthought of the label. Like I was very apologetic. I'm like, I'm sorry, we're doing like a 9th version of this soup can label that is in the background. And the designer was like, no, I appreciate this. Like, you actually care about this, and this means something. And that helped me. That helped me a lot to sort of reconcile. But the amount of time lost is pretty. That's, I feel, the highest cost. So I mean, anyways, that person starting out, whether they have a job that's creative adjacent or not, and then they're working at night on their creative stuff, that's their life, and they're using up that time in that way. I just happen to love that stuff, but I should plug in with people more. You know.
Yeah.
So.
But you have the 200 people that you at least.
There's those people, but you.
And what are you doing now?
Well, in the 7th season of The Walking Dead, I really want. I mean, this is very much related to what we were just talking about. I wanted to somehow not go around the clock anymore, but I loved The Walking Dead. I loved show running. I had a son in 2015, and I wanted him to like know my name. And even though I had that house in Georgia, which was all about him, I needed to slow down somehow, but I still wanted to do more. And the people at AMC at the time, this guy named Charlie Collier, who is in charge of Roku now, and Joel Stillerman. I talked to them about the possibility of really doing more Walking Dead that isn't Walking Dead or even Fear Walking Dead at the time. And this was, not quite when universes were taking hold. I mean, Marvel was absolutely a thing, this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I had this idea of just working on shows and launching them with all these great people, all this great talent that had been developed. And they called the job Chief Content Officer.
Okay.
Which, sounds like a banker, but that's what I moved into. But I started moving into that my 8th season of The Walking Dead. So it was like, oh, cool. By slowing down, I'm doing more. It was just that transition year. But I handed over the show to my number 2, this woman named Angela Kang, brilliant person. And I moved into creating new Walking Dead shows and sort of helping manage the shows that exist, whether it's, troubleshooting with them, whether it's working with them creatively on ideas. It's a lot of looking over scripts, and I look upon it as pitching them. I don't think you can tell a showrunner, do this, do that, I don't think showrunners can be showrun. But I kind of went back to being a writer and just pitching things, or being a creative resource, but also, building infrastructure of talented people for them to work with. And there's a gentleman I work with named Brian Bachrath, who's really on the ground, sort of helping all of these productions work. And then it's a lot of launching new shows. And then I did last year go back to show running a little bit. I did a 6-episode series called The Ones Who Live, which was with, 2 of the biggest characters in the series. And I was doing that at the same time as chief content officer, which was intense. I will say that job I thought would be less than show running, and it is, but it's only a little less. I thought it would be easy living, and it's definitely easier than show running. But with the amount of stuff that I'm doing, the amount of people I'm trying to support, even if I'm just supporting each of them a little bit, it's a lot. But it's very satisfying to sort of help people realize their visions, and to sort of keep it within our world. And, a lot of it is launching the shows and having the ideas to launching the shows, and then bringing people into those ideas. It's been really satisfying. I like writing and show running probably more, but it is satisfying to help people realize their visions. And then I've just started to work on shows outside the Walking Dead universe, that we're bringing out to other channels, other platforms. But I do that, of half of them that I'm going out with are with either Walking Dead actors, Walking Dead writers, or I look upon it as, for the last 15 years, whether it's crew people, whether it's actors, whatever, writers, obviously producers, we've been developing talent for 15 years, and we have really good relationships with them. And I just want to keep making stuff with them. So, that's been part of my mission now too. If I had to choose one thing, though, it would just be writing and producing. And I'm trying to figure out, and maybe getting into directing, maybe finally having enough time to do that. But I'm not doing that right now. I mean, I'm writing and producing, but I'm doing all these other things.
I listened to you on Colin and Samir.
Yes.
And essentially you were talking, the theme of the conversation was that YouTube was giving the streamers kind of a run for their money.
Yes.
And you had talked about like your habits were, you were sort of, your viewing habits were sort of morphing into the way your children viewed, and that I was getting the impression that you had like kind of an interest in, maybe not necessarily YouTube, but user generated. Absolutely. What would you do? What would you, when you think about it, like, or what are the ideas that bounce around your head? This will be the last thing that will.
The ideas I have, well, first of all, the thing that we were talking about was, how could you take sort of YouTube production or YouTube ethos and do something in between YouTube and like Netflix? And I think about that a lot. I don't want to do away with crews. I love working with all these incredible, basically experts at what they do. In addition to that, I would love to figure out ways to do things that are really light on its feet. I mean, there's a lot of things I look at, but 10 Bullets stuck in my head. as far as like, and I know that wasn't like you just picking up a camera and going, that there was a lot to it, but I like thinking of smaller things to do. And none of it really, I think, fits in the YouTube sort of ecosystem right now. It's more narrative. I mean, in an embarrassing way, I'll share like, oh, if I did a YouTube thing, it would be this. I don't see myself as a in front of the camera person, but a documentary series on just, I mean, sadly, it's just pet peeves. Which is just like what has happened with the world as far as people talking into their phones as a speakerphone in public. And it's funny, Angela Kang sort of explained.
Or just listening to whatever.
Yeah, or watching whatever.
Yeah.
And whether it be in restaurants or whatever. Angela actually explained something to me, and it's total logic. She's like, yeah, well, they took out the headphone jack. So
fair enough.
People don't want to buy AirPods, and they don't even, and I'm like, oh, she wasn't forgiving them, but she's like, oh, that's why it's happening. But I do go hiking sometimes. I actually do. I tell you, that's where things suffered. I was about 40 pounds heavier when I was going to ask.
I was going to ask if you got fat. Heavier. I was going to ask that. I did.
And I actually had the same thing happen when I did the cartoon. So it's like, after that, you shed the weight, and it takes a while. It takes some discipline. But, and then people come up to you and they go, are you okay? But what I wanted to do is like get a little card made up, and it's like, no shame, no shade. I just want to understand, would you be up for being interviewed about what you're doing? and
oh my, that just being yeah, okay, so I love this.
Bad Parkers. This might be just a little thing about my own misanthropy, but people who whistle in public.
Okay.
I think
I've had people tell me to stop. I had a boss say no whistling, and it just cured me. I never did it again.
I mean, if it was in a workplace, oh yeah, I support the boss, because who knows? But like you're in a grocery store and stuff like that, and somebody's doing like a full solo, like I just want to understand, like that sort of thing.
I love that. That's where you are sophisticated and mature enough to go past, because I'm not there yet, to go past the gratingness of it and bring it into like, no, this is a human being that they enjoy or something. Oh, but there's some of the other ones.
I just want to understand. Those were the top three. This was just recently because somebody put my feet to the fire.
I love it.
After the Colin and Samir thing.
Yes.
What would you do?
Oh my God.
But YouTube does have more of the streaming market share. And actually, it's funny. I got to hit Colin and Samir with this article that I read where I think it was like 10% or 11% of television viewing is now YouTube, and it's over like Netflix's 9% or something like that.
So 11% of when people are watching on their TV, they're watching YouTube.
And so this article, the article posited that I read, my stomach is grumbling throughout this. I hope it's not.
All right, we're going to brunch.
No, but
1 minute and 13 seconds.
I will say the article posited that 25% of all viewing, if you take into account phones and iPads and everything like that, was YouTube. That YouTube was far ahead. And I think luckily, when I would wake up at 4 a.m. to get ready for set, I would have you on, I would have Peter McKinnon on, maybe Maddie Hopcha. And it was, you don't want to wake up at that time. But it's very comforting to have something you want to watch right there. And, well, I should just say thank you, because you made those early mornings much more easy. But I think it is interesting, though, that I think YouTube is changing the consumption of filmed entertainment, not just aesthetically, But I don't know. It's just people want to just see people. It isn't like reality television live their lives or just make something unto themselves. One thing that I love is somebody who comes from comics or zines, and there's an authenticity to them. There's this guy who's been doing Comet Bus forever, which is just this San Francisco punk that writes about his life. And he must have been doing it for like 20 years, maybe more than that. And I don't know. There's another guy, John Porcellino, who does King Cat, he must be doing it more than 20 years. Again, simple drawings of his life, simple comics of his life. There's just a direct authenticity to it. And so what I was talking about with Colin and Samir beyond that is you have that connection, and podcasts do this as well. But if stuff comes out at a regular schedule, then you're just part of their lives. You're just part of, and TV used to do that. And I believe TV should do that, where these characters that you love, you can see them on Sunday night. And on Thursday, you'll be like, oh boy, I'm going to see that on Sunday night. For YouTube, that's still a thing for many creators. And I think it's a rough thing for me to say that's a great thing, because the grind on YouTube creators is they don't have a crew. A lot of the times. It's not cool for me to say, but as a YouTube consumer, the weekly videos meant everything to me in the same way that weekly shows mean everything to me. And I still love a lot of broadcast shows that maybe don't light up the world with their artistry, but they write things in the rhythms of television to get me through the commercial, and then to get me at the end of the episode to want to watch the next episode. It's a form that is just hits us the right way. And I think that form has been let go of in the streaming era. And it doesn't need to, even if they don't do it weekly. If you have those intervals of whether it's dopamine or whatever, those 5-act intervals, there's something to it that just hits you. So many of these, I know I'm pontificating, the last thing, so many of these streaming platforms are like, we just need the data. We get the data, we're going to know what people want to see. And I'm like, the data is 75 years of television. It's right behind you. Just look at that. You can see what people want to see. You can even see how people want to see it. But I don't know if that's being embraced so much, but I know that that's the key, or I'm a dinosaur. I might be a dinosaur. And that might be the meteor that's coming down to hit me.
Well, thank you so much for coming all the way up here.
For the love of God, end on something more positive than that. Just say one thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to be like, and I'm going to be hit by a meteor. No, I can't have that.
Okay. We're going to go out to lunch after this if you have time.
Yes, I do. If it's
it'll be fast, at the counter, bring it to the table, that kind of situation.
I got to be back in Studio City at 12:15. So.
And we're going to talk about the pet peeve channel.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh really?
I've been zoning out thinking about it as we've been talking. But great to have you, and thank you so much.
Oh no, this is for real. It's weird to step in here because again, it's meant so much to me. I'm a Patreon. I don't know if
thank you for your support. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. All right, Braxton. Cool.